We live in a twilight world. Let's do another quick recording. Once again, we're looking at the book Magic, Stage Illusions and Scientific Diversions by Albert A. Hopkins, written in 1897, so Victorian era, book about, as the title suggests, illusions, stage effects, special effects, all that kind of stuff. Today, the topic specifically we're going to be looking at is traps, as in trapdoors on the stage. Doesn't matter, theatre stage, opera stage, ballet stage, or the stage used by a magician to do his illusions. Remember, the world is a stage. Every man and woman is an actor, merely playing a role. So I will just read this little chapter here in the middle underneath where it says traps. The trap is one of the oldest and most primitive means of producing stage illusions, and it is in use today in most theatres and opera houses. The principle is very simple and will be understood by reference to the engraving. The actor, singer, or devil who is to make his sudden appearance upon the stage stands on a platform which is hoisted up to the stage level by means of winches turned by the stage hands. Interesting. And I'll just read you that top bit where it says theatre secrets, because I'm not going to go into the whole chapter today. I just want to focus on traps. But generally speaking, we're covering theatre secrets, aren't we, when we talk about illusion warfare? So it says, in the present chapter, the subject of theatre secrets will be taken up, and it will be treat of traps, complicated stage settings, properties, and the means of obtaining elaborate effects. So we'll cover this chapter bit by bit. Yeah, theatre secrets is what we're generally talking about anyway, right? In regards to illusion warfare, world stage theatre. But yeah, man, today we just want to focus on traps. You all know what that is, yeah? Trapdoors, secret doorways or gateways or exits or entrances that are hidden in the stage floor, where, as it says, which I find quite interesting, where the devil can jump out and scare the audience. Here is a close-up of the illustration, or engraving, as they call it in the book. Yeah, pretty self-explanatory. As you can see, the actor or the speaker or the dancer or the magician is being lifted up there by stage hands, and he's being, put upon the stage. Or maybe he's being taken away from the stage. Maybe he's disappearing very quickly. Either way, I'm sure most of you get what a trapdoor is. You know what a trapdoor is. So, how does this now relate to the modern day? How does this relate to world stage theatre happening right now? Well, let's talk about it. So what we'll do is we'll talk about it first off, very straight down the line, very reasonable. As the recording goes on, I want to get more and more outrageous and absurd with the speculations, to the point where you say, fucking hell, I think this geezer's smoking crack. It's too much for me, what he's saying. That's the end goal. So yeah, let's start off being very sort of reasonable and consensus reality, something the normies can sort of comprehend and understand, yeah? Okay, so the most recent chapter of World War III, or World War 33, whatever you want to call it, the United States of Israel versus Iran, Operation Epic Fury, the closing of the Straits of Hormuz and the potential oil crisis. In case you're listening to this well into the future, right now it is the 11th of May, 2026, yeah? And yeah, one of the big things about this war with the United States of Israel and Iran is the notion that the Iranians have what they call missile cities. Pretty self-explanatory, but in case anyone is, half asleep, underground bases or underground installations where they can hide their most valuable assets. So they can hide their fighter jets, their helicopters, their tanks, their drones, and of course their, short range, medium range, and long range missile systems. So the storyline is that Iran has been waiting for this war for the last 20 years, and in preparation, they have done a very smart thing of making these missile cities, which are underground installations or bases, whatever you want to call them. And this is obviously to counter the USA, which is an air power. The USA's whole thing is, we've got stealth bombers. We can just come into your country and bomb the shit out of you. Well, touche. The Iranians have obviously countered this with their tactic of hiding their most valuable assets underground in these missile cities. Very smart, very clever. Kind of means that the US Air Force and the US military's tactic of, bombing from the skies is kind of useless here. So there you go. You could just say that these missile cities very much act as the space beneath the theatre stage, with them, with the entrance being the same as a trapdoor, right? So they can enter and exit the theatre of war when it suits them. When there are US stealth bombers around, everything is hidden below the stage. When they feel it's safe, they pop up. Now they're on the stage, and now they're firing missiles here, there, and everywhere, only to once again jump back down a trapdoor and disappear again. So there you go. That's the comparison I'm making. That book there, Magic, Stage Illusions, Scientific Diversions, talking about trapdoors in theatres written in the Victorian times, is pretty much the same concept as missile cities and you popping in and out of the theatre of war when it suits you to fight the Americans. So there you go. That's a pretty straightforward metaphor. That's a pretty straightforward analogy. These underground bases, these missile cities, are very similar to the stagehands who work below the theatre stage, and they can enter and exit the theatre via the trapdoors when it is necessary. This is straightforward, yeah. That's a direct comparison between the two. Now then, let's look at this through the eyes of all warfare is based on deception. And deception being the most powerful weapon on the battlefield. Is it possible that these missile cities are fictional? They don't actually exist. Like, as you can see in this picture here, in the previous picture, and if you've ever watched any of these videos, they do look very off. They look very much like CGI. It wouldn't take a lot, would it, for an AI to whip up videos of vast underground cities and tunnels and networks and underground aircraft hangars and all this kind of stuff. Very easy for AI to create. So is this a bluff? Is this total deception? Because, and if it is, it's kind of genius when you think about it, right? Because let's just say, let's just for argument's sake go along with the war between the United States of Israel and Iran being pretty much as they say it is. Two factions going at it, trying to defeat each other. People are getting killed, blah, blah, blah. For the Iranians, who have on paper, not such a big and powerful military as the USA, they would have to implement deception. And this would be a great one, because the fact that these are hidden underground, who's to say or to confirm that they are real or not? And from an American point of view, American-Israeli point of view, they would have to take this seriously if they are going to attempt to win any conflict with this nation. You can't just automatically assume that everything's a deception if you're going to, at some point, put boots on the ground. Now, like I said, this is a brilliant piece of use of deception, because your aerial surveillance is not going to be able to pick it up. Satellite images is not going to be able to pick it up. Even sending in some of your own special forces guys with a pair of binoculars, it's going to be very, very hard to pick this up. The only way you could kind of confirm it's true, and well, until you actually go and put boots on the ground in Iran and actually break into one of these, you're never going to know, are you? You could have essentially a double agent working in Iran, but how do you know they're not feeding you false information? How do you know they're not XX double-crossing you? How do you know the double agent that is supposedly working for the USA is actually still loyal to Iran and is giving the USA, Israel, chicken feed? Or misdirection, or misinformation, whatever. How do you know? Or another potential scenario is maybe they have 10. They've got 10 missile cities across the whole of Iran, but via the use of deception, they're making it look like they've got 100. Yeah, they're making it appear like they've got 100. They're just using trick photography and, like we spoke about before, AI imagery to make it look like there is more than they have. And vice versa, yeah? Maybe they've got 100, but they want the enemy to only think they've got about 10. We just don't know. You know, like Sun Tzu says, when you are weak, appear strong. When you are strong, appear weak. And with this one, it's brilliant because there's so much mystery around it, and we don't really know, do we? Just think about it, yeah? All Iran has to do is put like a decoy trapdoor or a decoy entrance on the side of a mountain. And then, you know, people are going to assume that all of this is real inside the mountain just because there's an entrance point on either side of the mountain. They're going to fill in the blanks with the theatre of their mind and assume that all of this is real. So sure, let's just say Iran does have 10 of these missile cities. But then they've just got to put these decoy entrances on every mountain going, and the enemy is going to have to assume that every mountain there is one of these installations, one of these facilities inside. Don't you think that's really clever in regards to using deception as a weapon? You know, and this method was used before in the 60s, right? In the Vietnam War. The Viet Cong had, allegedly, I don't know because I wasn't there, but the Viet Cong would use underground tunnel systems. Once again, so you can pop on the theatre of war, pop into the theatre of war when you want, pop out when you want. This says, typical Viet Cong tunnel complex, 1960 to 1970, sources People's Army of Vietnam and US Army records. You know, as you can see here, concealed trapdoor, ventilation shaft facing east, punji stake trap, conference chamber, conical air raid shelter that also amplified sound of approaching aircraft, so you could hear the Hueys coming in. Dien Bien Phu kitchen, remote smoke outlets. This one's interesting, look, a false tunnel. Obviously, if a couple of GIs would go down and raid the tunnels, they would get trapped in a false tunnel and, you know, I'm sure it wouldn't end well. Storage cache for weapons, explosives and rice. Well, water table. Blast, gas and waterproof trap doors. Tunnel drop as blast walls, sleeping chamber, forward station for wounded. So here we go. Once again, once you're above ground, you're in the theatre of war, You use these trapdoors to then go below the stage and move around. So there you go. That's another example of, WarZone, where they're using trapdoors in exactly the same way a trapdoor is used when it comes to the theatre stage, the opera stage, or a stage used by a magician for their illusions. It's the same principle, isn't it? It's the same concept. Now, obviously, before anyone starts sending me emails trying to be a smart ass, I'm not saying that any of this is real. I wasn't alive in the 60s, and I definitely wasn't in the Vietnam War. So we don't know. It could be totally true. It could be half true. It could be pure fiction. This might have been made up stories by the US government to explain why they lost the war. We know with every war, they sensationalize everything, they exaggerate everything, and they tend to, as the years go by, keep adding on more and more and more fiction. Yeah? Which they've been doing with every war. So yes, could be true, could be totally false, doesn't matter. The vast majority of people believe it. That's all that matters. Another similar thing, the Maginal Lines. So before World War II got going, when things were heating up in Europe, the French decided to build a series of underground trench systems known as the Maginal Lines, because the guy at the time, the defense minister, was, I think, André Maginot. Now this was, this to me is one of these proofs that World War II was a complete setup and engineered from the go, because although this was considered like a marvel of 20th century engineering, like it had a lift going up and down, it was air conditioned, it had an electric railway that could move the troops up and down, it had a cinema, all that kind of stuff. It was stupid because it was no secret the Germans had tanks, lots of tanks, lots of mechanized armor. They even released their book, Achtung Panzer, which explained how they would fight in a war using tanks very quickly, the Blitzkrieg method. Now, the problem is that the French, along with the British, but the French were one of the countries that introduced the tank into the battlefield, into existence. So why would they suddenly go back to this idea that tanks don't exist and that the key would be an underground fortified trench system? If you don't know the story, the Germans just simply drove around the Maginal Lines and came down through Belgium and completely overran the French. In fact, the Maginal Lines, the shield of France, done more to protect Germany than it did to protect France. Anyway, once again, you've got a network, a system that is underneath the theatre of war. Same principle, trapdoors, world stage theatre, you get the connection. So now let's move it up a gear with the craziness, and I'll tell you another potential possibility when it comes to these underground bases. So this war, like every war, is being engineered, it's being created, it's being made to happen. There is one hidden hand and it controls both sides of the war. It moves them around like pawns on a chessboard. Every event is scripted. Every provocation is either orchestrated or staged. It doesn't really matter. And they use war, the hidden hand uses war as a way to manipulate and control our reality, to manipulate and control humanity, and to manipulate and control the timeline. Yeah, you're using the power of deception and theatricality via the war to manipulate how things are going to be and to push the world in a certain direction. Now, I could argue that the hidden hand are actually good guys who keep the world spinning, and that phony wars stop real wars from happening, and that the hidden hand, their whole mission objective is to keep the world spinning and to stop us all from eliminating ourselves via real wars. So, this, we'll stick with Iran versus the USA and Israel. Epic Fury, Straits of Hormuz, 2026. The underground missile cities, or the alleged missile cities, they're basically being used as deception against everyone. Yeah? You've got to remember, the hidden hand doesn't really give a fuck about Persians or Anglo-Saxons or whatever. It's not really about that. The war is the war, and the war is being used as a way to manipulate the entire world stage. With this war, it's really fucked up. The oil situation, yeah, and energy. So the underground missile city is merely just a dud target for people in, for airmen in the US Air Force and Israeli Air Force. It gives them a real experience when they're dropping bombs on these coordinates. You have to understand, people in the military, they have no idea that they are participating in illusion. I know this is horrible to say, because I know some of you are if you've either been in the military or you've got family in the military, but people in the military, they just follow orders. They have no idea that it's all illusion. They wouldn't do. If they did, they wouldn't join up. And they essentially, unbeknownst to them, are sometimes the stagehands that make the theatricality all appear very real. So think about it. The airman in the US Air Force, he really did jump in the bomber, load up with bombs, fly over Iran, pulled the trigger, a load of bombs fell out the bottom of his plane, and he really did watch explosions. The big tower of smoke. But ultimately, he didn't actually bomb anything. He's just bombing he's been bombing the top of an empty warehouse, which is underground. For him, it's a very real experience. So he's now going to go back to the USA. They're going to put a medal on his chest. He's going to write a book. He's going to take part in interviews. He's going to have no idea that those coordinates were just phony coordinates that were probably just, slightly to the left of the missile city. A missile city which, by the way, only has the notion of missiles and drones and helicopters and fighter jets being inside. Probably empty, probably non-existent. Now you have to remember, when that US airman drops a bomb and it creates an explosion, also the people on the ground, like the citizens of Iran, they're going to film it. And they're going to post it to social media. Once again, this creates the war, makes the war appear very real. But they're not actually dropping bombs on civilians in Iran, are they? They're not actually dropping bombs on above-ground military bases. But in their minds, they believe they have successfully completed a mission and they have decimated a missile city. And of course, the Iranians, to them it's a victory, because they're going to get told that the bombing done nothing and the missile cities are still standing. But they're never going to get to go in the missile city and go look for themselves, A, whether to see it's been bombed, or B, whether to see it's real whatsoever. I guarantee you at 98% of people in the Iranian military will never ever be allowed to go inside those underground missile cities. Yeah? They'll be off limits. And how they get around this is what, like with every military, it'll be compartmentalized. So only certain regiments or certain special branches of the military will be the ones allowed in. 98% of the other guys, they'll just only believe it. They'll never actually see it for themselves. And you've got to remember, from like a propaganda point of view, they're going to be getting pushed very hard I mean, I'm talking about Iranian citizens with the belief that these places are real, they exist, and they are winning the war. Winning the war by not being destroyed by the US Air Force, and that these are actually, beating the US military in the war of attrition because they're just wasting $1 million bombing on top of it, which does nothing. So, I always like to break it up into three parts. Illusion warfare. Reality in general, you can break up into three parts. Inception, immersive, information. The three eyes of illusion warfare. So Inception, they've already put the idea into everyone's heads that this war is happening and that it's real. Immersive, well, these alleged underground missile cities and the bombing of them, that's immersive because these are going to be real bombs, real explosions. People can see it in the distance, the explosion, they're going to film it. That creates the immersive. The immersive is essentially creating physical evidence that backs up the illusion. Next, information, like I've just covered. The Americans are going to believe that their bombing is working. The Iranians are going to believe that their missile cities are working. Because they're underground, the bombs are useless. Both people are in formation, believing they are winning the war. When in reality, the war is just a phony load of shit, and you're just dropping bombs on decoy targets that don't really mean anything. Okay? Yeah, everyone is being deceived. The whole of humanity is being deceived via these wars. There's a whole list of things that the hidden hand uses, but war is the top one when it comes to fear and doom and moving stuff very quickly. I mean, the USA is being, the disillusionment of the USA is happening right now, isn't it? Because a lot of the world is watching, and although the Americans might think that they're winning, outside of America, a lot of people are looking at the US military and it's looking like a paper tiger, isn't it? That can't really do much other than drop bombs, and when someone essentially outplays them in that aspect and creates underground bases, that they're fucked. That their whole tactic, death from above, doesn't work. So once again, this is like the third war in a row now. Obviously Vietnam, Afghanistan, and now this one where America has lost. From an outsider point of view. So a lot of the, Trump and a lot of people in the military might be, popping champagne thinking they've won, but everyone else is watching going, yeah, the American military is not so mighty. And this, of course, is going to empower Russia and China, because they're essentially doing very well, and it pushes forward the new reality, which is going to be the multipolar world. So remember, the purpose of the illusion was always to manifest something real, yeah? And in this case, without actually anyone dying, with just the USA theatrically dropping bombs on empty warehouses that are built underground that may or may not exist, it's all creating a narrative that the USA is going downhill very quickly, is going south as a superpower. So let's now get even more crazy. Here's a map of the hollow Earth, or the inside Earth. I've got no idea where this map is from or what it's about. I just Google searched hollow Earth map. Okay, so all right, a lot of those underground bases, not just Iran but all across the world. England has loads, the USA has loads, Switzerland has loads. Sure, like 9 out of 10 of them are just, are what they say they are. They are nuclear bunkers or storage units in case of a foreign attack via nuclear bombs or on land, blah, 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 blah. But every 1 out of 9 is actually a secret entrance to these networks that exist in the hollow earth, tunnels and cave systems and waterways that can rapidly move you around the known earth. Yeah? I mean, I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard the stories, right? Apparently there are sort of like caves underwater, like deep underwater, and a submarine can go in it and zoom, get shot straight away across to the other side of the earth in a matter of minutes, because they're going straight through the core, and there's a sort of like pressure system going on there, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And of course, a little bit more to the surface, there are just endless natural tunnels that have always existed. And the hidden hand knows about all of these, and that's how they're moving the Ghost Legion around the known earth so quickly. So how does the hidden hand move the Ghost Legion into Iran, where they dress up as Iranians and dress up as Americans and do the whole fake fighting and shooting fireworks at each other? Well, this underground network of tunnels and waterways and caves and whatnot. But of course, you've got to keep this stuff hidden, concealed, camouflaged from humanity. So you create wars, and then under the guise of war, you trick the population of that nation to build the tunnels, thinking that they're building tunnels purely for the purpose to protect the people. But really, they're just building more and more trapdoors that lead to these secret transportation systems that naturally occur within the earth, thus giving the hidden hand more power to pop up wherever they wish, to run amok on the surface. And then bang, they vanish through their little network. Now, one of my theories is that all of these opera houses that exist in every city, the Paris Opera House, the London Opera House, the Rome Opera House, or even the National Theatre building, they're actually markers. And underneath those are, gateways or whatever. And that's how the hidden hand and all of their foot soldiers, the Ghost Legion, and all of their operatives know how to meet up, because it will always be in and around an opera house or a theatre house, because the tunnel system underneath aligns with the opera house, theatre house above. Yeah? Because the hidden hand has a lot of power, and we don't really know how or why. Like, what are they doing exactly? Well, this would be a good answer. The fact that they can move around very, very quickly in the shadows underneath the world stage. So, I don't know, for example, let's say they're going to stage a terror attack in Paris. They haven't got to fly the Ghost Legion into Paris. They haven't got to waste their time transporting them in, on the back of trucks. They would merely just use this underground system and just appear from a hidden location within Paris, like a trapdoor on the theatre stage, right? The same thing. They would just pop up, do their false flag operation, their illusion operation, easily get 5,000 of the Ghost Legion on the streets of Paris, dressed up as firefighters, dressed up as policemen, dressed up as terrorists, do what they got to do the illusion operation, and then bang, they all just disappear very quickly. They don't have to use any airports. They don't have to use any, seaports or navy ports or any motorways or anything like that. They are just moving underground, hidden, concealed, clandestine. That would explain a lot, if there really was networks of underground tunnel systems and waterways that can rapidly move people around Earth, and this is all hidden from us. And that is why the hidden hand has so much power, because they know about this and they're keeping it to themselves. And that's how they, that's how they're so powerful, Anyway, I'm going to stop talking now. That's a lot of talking for one man to do, a lot of rambling. We live in a twilight world. There are no friends at dusk.